Okay, let's get started. First and foremost, on behalf of UNC's Office of Research and Development, I'd like to thank you guys all for coming for what we hope will be the first of several occasions and opportunities to learn more about funding with the Department of Defense. My name is Nathan Bluen. I'm the Interim Director of the Office of Research and Development. And ORD is a pan-university research center reporting to Vice Chancellor for Research, Terry Magnuson, charged with really expanding the research capacity here at Carolina. One of the areas we identified as potentially being underserved and underutilized as a resource was your research projects that are relevant to our military branches and sponsor agencies. We're very, very pleased to see such a big turnout. When we initially were planning this, we thought maybe we'll get a room for 20 or 30 people. Our RSVP was over 200. We're so pleased you guys were able to make the time on Monday afternoon to come join us to learn about these opportunities. I also want to call special attention, and you'll hear more about this later in our talk. There are some upcoming DoD travel-related activities, workshops, and conferences. My office, the Office of Research and Development, does have travel funds available to help support travel to an agency for networking with defense professionals. So more information about those conferences will follow in the post-workshop email that will also circulate to everyone. And so it'll be a nice handy resource for you. So last thing before I actually turn this over to our presenters, I do want to thank the team at ORD who are responsible for organizing and putting on our space today. It's Denise Lindley, Tammy Moffitt, Gail Whitfield. These guys always do such a great job, and none of this would happen without their dedicated support. It's my pleasure now to introduce you to Dr. Kathy Olson and Dr. Bill Berry. Dr. Olson has a long and distinguished career, first as an NSF and NIH-supported neuroscientist, before ascending to leadership positions in major governmental and scientific grant-making agencies. Dr. Olson served as the Deputy Director and Chief Operating Officer of the National Science Foundation, where she oversaw a $6.5 billion R&D budget, and also served as the Associate Director for Science at the Office of Science and Technology Policy at the Executive Office of the President. Dr. Berry served as the Deputy Undersecretary for Defense for Laboratories and Basic Sciences. He also served as the Director for Basic Research, where he was responsible for scientific leadership, management, oversight, and coordination across the defense research agencies. He served also as the Associate Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Air Force for Science and Technology and Engineering, and Director of the Washington Office of the Air Force Research Laboratory, following a long career at the Air Force Office of Scientific Research, where he directed the Air Force's basic research programs in chemistry, life, and environmental sciences. Please join me in welcoming our presenters, Drs. Olson and Berry, to UNC Chapel Hill.
So we know it's a big crowd here, but Bill and I don't want to talk you to death. So we want it to be an interactive workshop in terms of questions and that. And originally we were going to go around and have everyone sort of say their areas of science, etc. So we want to know, we've got to get a feel here. How many people here are cognitive neuroscientists? Okay. Material scientists. Chemistry. Physics. Microbiome. Robotics, computer science. What are we missing? Engineering. Okay.
Mathematics. You're a mathematics people?
I see a math, yes. How many are graduate students? How many have graduate students? Good. How many have applied to DoD for funding? Okay, great. How many have gotten DoD funding? Great. And you can also chip in too to reinforce what we're saying in terms of the practices and policies as we go forward. How many people have had NSF funding? And NIH. Okay, because one of the things we're going to do is kind of talk about the contrast between how NSF and NIH work versus DoD. Any other? Okay, so right here. I want to show the background here is the synapse. As I said, I'm a neuroscientist. But I want to give credit to Graham Johnson, who developed this as part of the NSF AAAS Challenge, Visualization Challenge. But I use this because one of the points that Bill and I are going to make over and over again especially in DoD, but this is true in all the federal granting agencies, it's about connections. You really need to work with your program officer, program manager, however they're called, and you really should have a face-to-face activity, because that's critical in today's time in terms of support. So it's the synapse, but it's really about the connections. Okay, this is the agenda. We're going to do an over DoD 101. We're going to focus a lot on white papers, because white papers are really the first step in terms of getting in the door for DoD. We're also, Bill's going to walk you through a broad area announcement. This is very different than like the NSF and the NIH. The broad area announcements are basically done on a yearly basis. You can submit at any time. Again, with really after working with the program officers, we're going to talk a little bit about the merit review. We're going to talk about some cross forces research programs like the MIRI program, the Young Investigator program. They have a lot of programs like Career. They have the YIP. They have a RUI program like NSF. They have an instrumentation program like an MRI. It's Dura. And then we're going to talk about the congressionally directed medical research programs, the NERVA, and the importance of strategic planning and oversight, and using that when you approach Congress. When you approach the DoD. The second part is we're going to dwell into the different agencies, Air Force, DACA, ONR, Army. But at the beginning, everything we're going to say is very relevant for each one of the agencies. It's sort of like, you will talk about some of their specific programs, etc. But the white papers, the contacting the program officers, understanding the mission and the culture is critical. And so, as an overview, these are the federal agencies from NASA to NSF to NIH, DoD, AG, that funds USDA, that funds research. And just wanted to do the budget. This is the 2017 budget. As you know, they're in a CR, so they're working on the 2016 budget right now. Hopefully they'll get this. But DoD's budget is 72.83. I'm going to turn it to Bill.
That is a very misleading number. It's $70 billion of RD&E is the way I say it. Research, development, test, and evaluation. Only a very small piece of that actually goes for research. So the basic research, it's about $2 billion. So 72 billion, when you see those figures, R&D, basic research, $2 billion. Big difference. S&T, about $12 billion. If you count what we call basic research and applied research. Most of those funds go to universities.
Bill, got a question in the back?
Are you going to distribute the slide deck to this?
We're going to provide the slides to the office of the of the VP's office, yes.
Yeah, we'll make them available to everyone in this room.
Can you hear me in the back without a mic? Okay, good.
Good. Okay, next slide, yours, too.
Okay, so this is just a slide that shows you the sort of breakdown across, and it sort of reinforces what I just said, that most of the money in the DoD is not for university research. We're only talking about 6.1 and 6.2 money, and for universities, almost 3/4, I think, of 6.1 and 6.2 probably goes to universities. But that's about, as I said, $12 million total, $2 million in basic research.
And so I just wanted to briefly go through, this is the NSF indicators 2016, where they're looking at the different agencies and what fields that they are really responsible for. And again, I'm doing this so you get a picture of, NSF, okay, life sciences, environmental sciences, computational engineering. And I'm sorry, that was the total. Here's NSF. Okay, so this is sort of the breakout of NSF in terms of their portfolio. Here's HHS. which is primarily life sciences, but they also fund physical sciences, computer, social sciences, and engineering. And here's the Department of Defense. So primarily engineering, but they support a lot of life sciences, computer mathematics, physics, social science here. They actually support more social science than depicted here. Did you want to say something about that?
Well, I think Kathy's going to talk later about a program called Minerva, which is a program that started in 2008 to try and get more people in universities interested in addressing social and cultural problems across the Department of Defense and understanding better how we interact with these different cultures. And so we'll address that a little bit. But those dollar numbers I don't think are included in these NSF slides. It's a separate program. It's not really actually didn't start in the DoD research area program.
And also, DARPA recently had a workshop where they asked people in social sciences to come in and provide them ideas in terms of where DARPA should be leading in this area. And so one of the things that you should ask yourself is, you know, I have my research ideas, okay? And which agency is it appropriate for? I'm a neuroscientist, so my research can be funded by NIH, NSF, DoD, NASA, are the primary focuses in terms of that areas. And so one of the first places to start is actually reading the solicitation are in the defense world, the broad area announcements. And the broad area announcements, unlike a solicitation, are very thick and a lot of information because it's broad areas. And so they put everything in it. And what you need to do, and Bill's going to walk you through this, is find where's that that's part of that actually fits in with my research and my research ideas. The other thing that's really important is to appreciate and recognize the agency's mission. Okay? You guys know NSF, you know NIH, and you know if you're going to submit a grant to both NSF and NIH, the way that you put the introduction and the significance and the innovation is going to be very different. So as I say, I'm a neuroscientist, and my first grant I put in for both. For NIH, I talked about a sex-linked mutation that was found in humans, okay, called testicular feminization. For NSF, I put in a model system to understand the role that testosterone and estrogen plays. The experiments were the exact same experiments, okay, but the introduction, the mission was very, very different. I got funded by both, and I took NIH because NSF stands for not sufficient funds. NIH is no immediate hope now. But the other thing that's really important is once you look at the solicitation, and once you read the BAA, and you recognize and you understand the mission, you want to call the program officer. You want to email them first. And when you email them, this is important. Don't say, I got an idea. Say, I'd like to talk to you. In the next 2 weeks, I'm available these times. Otherwise, you get into this email fight and say, I'm available. And then Bill's going to be talking about the white paper and then provide them with the white paper. But it's interesting, and I know when both Bill and I were program officers as well as we moved up the chain in terms of responsibilities. But when I was a faculty member, I was afraid to call my program officer. And I was funded by Child Health. I ran into my program officer a year ago at Child Health, and I started shaking. And I'm thinking, my God, first of all, he's still there, and I'm a father. But the thing is that's really a critical step. The other one is beware of the culture of the agency. Do not call NSF and say that you're going to be working on this disease-related project, because that program officer is never going to fund it. You're NIH. Don't call a DoD and say you don't really care about the soldiers, okay? That you want to do this material science for X. Understand and be aware of the culture of the agency. Understand, acknowledge it, address the aims and goals, and you want to, this is really, really critical, for any of your, and this is true for any of the funded programs and agencies, you want to address the potential impact of proposed work on the mission. Why should they care? Why should the taxpayer care? You know, it's critical. And this is just a point that I wanted to make, and I'm going to turn it over to Bill. But you have a great idea. That idea might be relevant for more than one agency. In today's times, you want to shop around. You really want to understand, how do I make it appropriate for that? Now, the important thing is that you can submit, in most cases, to more than one agency at the same time. But you cannot accept money from different federal agencies for the same work, or you will go to jail and you will be debarred. So I want to make that really well known. But at the same time, you can turn down that agency. Okay, I'm going to let Bill talk about this one, which is about the different scientific reviews that different people use.
Okay, so Kathy hit sort of the high points of what you need to do when you approach the agency. The agencies want to know really four things. One, what do you want to do? Two, why do you want to do it? Who cares if you're successful? And why should they be? Then they want to know how you're going to do it, what's your technical approach, what do you expect results to be, and so forth. And then they want to know about you, who. So you make sure you address all those things, unless you can address sort of the first two, what you want to do and why you want to do it, and why that agency should care, you're sort of done before you start. So in terms of merit review, there are all kinds of merit reviews across the government. NSF has panels that meet and do selection, and then the program manager then decides after the rack and stack is done, which of those are going to get funded, given the amount of money they have. Most of you, I noticed, have NIH money, so you know how that works. Rack and stack, panel reviews. DoD is very different than that. It's very much up to each agency how they do merit. Some organizations in DoD, like DARPA, reviews are done entirely by the government, with some outside input. At AFOSR, each program has to have at least 3 external reviews of each proposal, and then the program manager looks at those and decides which ones are going to get funded. The Navy is similar. The Navy just had a big effort in the last few years to really beef up its peer review process, and it does that with external panels. It can also include government employees, but they do it in a similar way. Since they have open BAAs, that is, you can submit a proposal any time of the year for Army, Navy, and Air Force basic research offices, there isn't any real racking and stacking of all the proposals at once because they come in at different times. And so it's a very different process than you think of at NIH or NSF, where there are deadlines for proposals, panels have to meet certain deadlines to get their reviews done. It's a very different process. And it's very important, as Kathy said, to make those connections with the program officer. And we're going to help you, show you how to do that. So I guess that's all I would say about the differences in terms of peer review. And this just sort of sums up that there are different reviews. And for the Defense Department in general, I would say it's the box up there to the very right top. Review is advice to the program officer who makes decisions based on merit, program goals, and balance of his particular or her particular portfolio.
Right. And I also, not being in defense and working with some of them, also think the program officer in some cases already knows what and who they want to be funded at DoD. In many cases, like DARPA, they'll have a kind of an idea going in. But what you want to do is make sure that they know who you are and your ideas, so you're who they want and who they want to see ideas from. But this is just a point, because you have to really understand that for each of the ones.
Okay, so another important point to make here, I think, is the importance of contacting the program office. I'm going to say that over and over, because you find that to be the place where most PIs seem reluctant. You pick up the phone and call Joel Davis at O&R or Hugh DeLong at Air Force. Oh, he just went to ARO, so pick them up, call them. They're human beings. They like to talk to people. They're interested in science. You're interested in science. Yes.
I At the NIH, there's a big distinction between extramural and intramural, like the research that's done within there, and the program officers, are separate from necessarily the research that staff people are doing. Is that a distinction with these or not?
Yes, that's a very good point. At Air Force Office of Scientific Research, Army Research Office, and the Office of Naval Research, those people really are program officers and managers of portfolios of research. Most of them, some of them do research, but most of them are not themselves actively doing research. So that is a big difference. But they do rely on people in their various laboratories, as we'll point out, to help determine directions of programs, what proposals best fit things going on in the laboratory, and that's where the whole balance issue comes in, their portfolio balance. About 30% of the funds that like AFOSR, ONR gets go to what we call intramural, go to Air Force Research Laboratory principal investigators, and go to like Naval Research Labs.
But like, for example, I worked out at NIH when I was an NSF program officer, but I didn't get any money from them or et cetera. But one of the points that Bill's going to be making later, and they have programs to really bring in you scientists working at the intramural research laboratories there, because it then helps you get into the system and helps you to get your independent funding as well, which is not true at NIH.
Okay, so this sort of says, I think, what we just said, but I would like to drive another point home. Program managers are constantly thinking about what new programs should they have to address new concerns and issues across the military. They welcome your ideas. They might start a whole program based on just a discussion they had with a PI who said, we think you should be doing work in circadian rhythm because it's important for X, Y, and Z. And they'll go to their superiors to pitch a program, get money. And so don't be afraid to talk to program officers.
Yes.
Here, Bill.
I was wondering, it seems like some of these funding organizations are going more toward this idea of a letter of intent where people can apply and the program officers have a chance to sort of get a look at ahead of time and invite those people they think have a chance to participate. Is that something that people are going more toward? And the other thing is, I know that some people are now invited to submit either a letter or a grant, and I'm wondering if this is because somebody has an idea in these funding organizations and searches PubMed and sees what's out there who might be a good fit for this idea that they have and are directly interacting with the PIs, and so I'm wondering how that's working these days.
Okay, what you're calling a letter of intent is what we're calling white papers.
Right.
Okay, same thing. Programs are often put together, and sometimes people are, you run into somebody at a conference, what you think is a good idea, fits your program, you may actually ask them, would you send us a letter of intent or a white paper? So we can think more about exactly what you want to do, how much money it's going to cost for you to do that, etc. So there are invitations, if you will, to submit, but anyone can submit a white paper. You always have a better chance of submitting a white paper if you actually talk to the program manager first and get some sense from him or her as to whether what you're talking about he really thinks or she really thinks fits in their program.
So you know how NSF and NIH will give you your success rates, right? They'll say FILES funding at 15%, NIH institutes funding at X%. You never see those numbers at DoD. And part of it is the fact that they do eliminate a lot of proposals coming in beforehand that they're not interested in. And think about it, that this is saving you a lot of time. And in terms of one of the success rate numbers that was floated by me is if they allowed you to submit a proposal, they encourage it, then the success rate's about 50%. Okay, again, that's by chance, but that's sure a lot better than the other federal agencies. And so that is really a gatekeeper. What's interesting, and we'll get to this is Army. Army uses this in the biomedical field very well. They have this pre-proposal they call, or a white paper that they do, but they'll just say you can submit or you can't submit, right? But they don't give you any feedback. So unlike NSF and NIH, where they say this is the problem, this is the issue, they just say not interested. So that's, again, working with the program officers to try to get some ideas, because otherwise they say just not interested.
Okay, the bottom bullet there simply talks about there are many opportunities for partnering with scientists in Air Force research laboratories. And as Kathy mentioned, that's a good way to build a relationship and understand better what are the real issues and concerns from scientists who are actually working in the Defense Department laboratory. And that helps you think about how best to shape proposals that you might submit at a later time for funding. This is something we said over and over already,
Yes.
I think. So I'm not going to repeat it. But we can't say it enough, I guess, is the point here.
Bill, quick question here.
Yes.
Could you speak to, so if you go to a program manager, you meet them, you tell them about your research, they're excited about it, they go and they pitch it to their seniors. What's the timeline there? So from the point of talking to the program manager to the possibility of having a program that fits your research agenda, is it a couple years or a couple months?
It can be as short as maybe not a couple months, maybe it probably takes 2 months once the program manager decides to fund something to actually get it on contract. But a decision to fund something, assuming the proposal has come in and it takes maybe a month or 2 to get it reviewed, you could have money easily in 5 months.
But the creation of, I mean, if they're going to create a program based off of your idea, I mean,
But that might take, creating a whole new program may take a little longer because they have to pitch it to upper management and try to get new money.
But the broad area announcements, one of the things I like about it is broad. So they can almost fit any creative idea within their solicitation of the BAA, which is open up for a year. If they're interested in coming in and seeing your ideas, it can usually work in the BAA.
And sometimes they'll use your idea, give you a grant, show the community they're interested in that area, and fit it into a program they already have going while they take the time to develop a funding stream for that particular area of research. So don't be bashful. You all have great ideas. Share them. Okay, so we'll talk more about white papers later. Talk to program managers. They're interested in working with you. Free proposals, actually, as Kathy said, save you a lot of time, save the research organizations a lot of time reviewing proposals that are never going to get funded. So that's why DoD drives very hard on the white paper process. And like Kathy said, you get white paper, your ideas are accepted, and they actually say, yeah, please send us a proposal, your chances are a lot higher than a lot of other federal agencies get funded. So they've already screened pretty much what you want to do, your background, everything from the white paper. So what we're going to talk about today are primarily Air Force Office of Scientific Research, the Army Research Office, and the Office of Naval Research, basic, because they have most of the basic research money in the DoD, and DARPA, and maybe you'll mention DITRA and the Chem Bio Defense Program, but those are really sort of outliers, I would say, to the main defense basic research and broad agency announcements.
They're the major players, the free services and then DARPA.
Okay, I would just say that the basic research program is very broad. Has to be DoD relevant, but it's a very broad program. That's why they call these broad agency announcements, and they're open announcements, so you can submit a proposal at any time. These are areas which have particular focus at the moment across the Department of Defense agencies. Synthetic biology, novel materials, nanoscience, cognitive neuroscience, information, and cybersecurity in particular, and artificial intelligence and economy. And in that, I would include things like human-robot interactions and so forth in this field of autonomy, includes a lot of things that are around that area, very broad. And, you know, DoD only provides about 7% of all basic research funding, but they provide a lot, as you can see, in engineering and mathematics across the government. Less so in life sciences, psychology, and those areas. It's a competitive and a multifaceted program. Broad agency announcements and then specific announcements for how many know about MURI program, multidisciplinary university research initiative. Some people think that means multi-university initiative. It doesn't have to be multi-university, but it does have to be multidisciplinary. So people from, you know, cognitive science and microbiology need to get together so that they can all be from UNC. It still fits the bill. People sometimes get confused, think they have to work with another university. That's not necessarily true.
Actually, one of the last year's Murray's, every year new topics come out. But one of the topics that I thought was really fascinating, being a neuroscientist, was the microbiome and cognition. And that was actually both ONR, both Navy and the Air Force was very interested in this area. And the growth of the area because they're interested in learning, memory, and performance factors.
There are separate broad agency announcements for that particular program. Young Investigator Program, very similar to programs in NSF and other organizations. We'll talk a little bit more about that if you're interested. And we use in-house scientists and laboratories to make sure that what the research we're supporting, they think could have potential application down the line to things that the lab and the greater Air Force, Army, Navy, DoD more broadly is interested in. So it's a flexible and balanced portfolio, balanced along mission orientation and long-term basic research. It says, you know, we have usually programs that run 10, 15 years of funding in a particular program area because it is long-term basic research. So there's a commitment to develop key capabilities. It takes a long time. Basic research, so they're not like DARPA programs generally are 4 years. 4 years, the program is successful, you're done. These are longer-term basic research programs in the 3 services. We spend a reasonable amount of money, I would say, in DoD on what we call infrastructure, and we include people in infrastructure. So support for students and postdocs. And we'll talk in a little more detail about some of those programs that are available for students and postdocs and for young faculty. And once again, planning and oversight is important. So we'll show you that in DoD, sometimes we get criticized in DoD because we overplan. If anything, DoD does a lot of planning. And we do treat plans just as a plan. It gives you a path to get somewhere. You may not necessarily get there, but at least you had some plan to do. So it's useful for you, and you can find all these on the web. It's public information. Look at the Naval Strategic S&T plan, the Air Force Technology plan, etc. Because they give you ideas of what's the broader thinking of where these organizations are headed, and where do they see cognitive science fitting into this, and where they see new materials, multifunctional materials, nanomaterials, whatever, fitting into their programs. So that's always worth doing.
Yeah, and it's always good to look at it before you're preparing the white paper, and if you can refer to the strategic plan, and your ideas are actually appropriate, and you say, I can fit it in here, that's a really good point to make. Because again, a lot of the BAAs are actually focused on the strategic plan as well, that they do about every, 4 years?
Yeah. Money. So this shows the destination of basic research money. You can see which organizations have it. The Navy actually has the biggest pot of basic research money of the 3 services. And you can see that most of it, over half of it, goes to universities. About 30%, as I mentioned, gets spent in in-house laboratories. We call that intramural. And a little bit of it goes to industry partners and I won't talk about federally funded research and development centers, but they're a special category that gets a lot of congressional attention. Okay, lots of programs for universities. The first one I want to talk about is SMART program. Science, Mathematics, Research for Transformation, we call it. It started back when I was in DoD. It's really a great program in the sense that it provides scholarships to students, bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, PhD degrees, pays their whole way, requires them to spend their summers in a DoD research facility for which they get paid, and it guarantees them a position in one of those laboratories. In fact, they're required to pay back, I think it is 1 year for every year of support they get, working in some place in the Department of Defense. So it guarantees the job when you're done, they pay your whole education, they pay for your summer work. I say what's not to like, but some people don't like it. It's a reasonably funded program, and it is at this time I think all full, but they're looking for new applications all the time. They have other programs, the NDSEG, there's no payback requirement there. It's just an award you give to top students in the U.S. because we want to get them interested in defense issues and problems.
And we have slides on each one of these, but I just want to point out how many people, when I was a graduate student, I was required to put in for the NSF graduate fellowship. Okay, how many people require your students to go in for the NSF graduate fellowship when they're first or second year graduate student? Okay, and I was also required to go in for the NIH. This, the National Defense Science and Engineering Graduate Fellowships, works the same way as the NSF one. So if you're in areas, and I'll show you the areas that they support from physics to mathematics, it's really good. And one of the things that we tried to do when I was at OSTP is not compete among the agencies. So the graduate fellowship from NSF and NIH and DoD would all be the same. Well, DoD gives more money than NSF. So bottom line, and for the undergraduate fellowships. They also have a program called Assure, which is their RUI program, Research for Undergraduates. And then we'll go into these other ones as well.
Yeah, the only thing I think is interesting to point out, if you go to the bottom there, DoD labs, they have lots of experiences for faculty members to go there and work in the summer. Various kinds of programs like that to try and get faculty interested in working with DoD scientists.
And they pay you too. Yes.
Quick question back.
I was just wondering, for the education programs, are these only for U.S. citizens?
And green cards. Just like NSF.
This sort of gives you more about the SMART program and actually shows the dollars involved. So they pay full tuition, education and fees, stipend, summer internship, mentoring at the lab, and employment after graduation.
And the 15 disciplines will be listed in another slide where they talk about the graduate fellowships. And here they are.
That's the NDSEG. So you see they cover lots of areas.
Yeah, from geoscience, chemistry, cognitive neurobehavioral sciences. So again, think about it with your graduate students. This is a great opportunity for them to, and again, if they're going to submit to NSF, and they're writing it up for NSF or NIH at the same time, if they've got a relevant discipline, why not have them also think about submitting it to DoD? Increases their chances. Again, they can't accept it from all.
Again, same work that you propose,
Different.
right? The graduate work, but you have to be sure you're remembering what the mission is of the agency, so you shape your introduction. Yes.
Along the lines of mission, if a graduate student receives a stipend and they're working on something that falls within the mission of the DoD, and then their project changes or what have you, and they're no longer really fall within that mission, do they risk losing the fellowship? Would DoD pull them back?
Actually, I I can answer that in a roundabout way. They try to work with students and faculty who have students on those situations so they don't get lost, if you will, in the process. But if they really are shifting away from something that fits a DoD mission or someplace where they could work in a lab, I mean, we've had students in this program who went to the Naval Research Lab and started working on projects there, and got away from what they were doing at the Naval Research Lab. We were able to find them other situations in other DoD labs where they could continue working on the areas that they're now heading into. So we try to work with students that way. Would they chop them off if there was actually no interest? I would say probably. You know, we're trying to invest in people, and we're hoping that people will come and work with us. We're not going to do that. But that's different than the NDSEG. You can work on whatever you propose to do, whatever it's going to be. We have a new, well, this really isn't new, it's a new name. It's called the Vannevar Bush Faculty Fellowship. This is a program for faculty members who can get grants for up to 5 years. There's $3 million in the program spread over 10 fellows each year. And the only commitment to that is you have to be willing to work at least with somebody in the laboratory. Not work at the laboratory, but have a program of research that fits with somebody in one of our laboratories. And we have, as we showed you, lots of laboratories, things we call laboratories. And so, once again, the connection on this program is important, figuring out for somebody in the DoD lab system who might be interested in my XYZ experience. But it's a pretty nice program too, and it's very selective. You can see only 10 fellows across DoD each year. And we talked about it, yes.
Yeah. So basically, we've already mentioned MIRI, and this is something that's really important. And if anything comes out of this workshop, hopefully there'll be 1 or 2 MIRI grants in terms of white papers that go forward. They're anywhere between 500,000 to 1 million a year, usually for 5 years, 3 years, and then plus 2. Every year they come out in May with specific topics. And there's usually probably about 35 different topics. And in the topic, they'll have what their ideas is, and then the name of the program officers and the area. So Army has topics, ONR has topics, Navy has topics. They change every single year. And again, when we're talking about having some of your ideas, again, getting to the program officers, getting those people, it could be what you really do could be one of the topics for the MIRI. They're interdisciplinary, or multidisciplinary. Again, a lot of times they're cross institutions, but they don't have to be. And they're really great programs, and it's really very much fundamental, basic research.
Yeah, the topics change each year, but the topics that have already been funded, of course, go on for normally 5 years. Some of them then get picked up in regular research programs of their services also. So it can be a very long-term, basic research program that you're committed yourself to, and the Air Force, the Army, and the Navy is committed themselves to. And I think the next slide may show the Air Force.
Yeah. And I just wanted to add, last year the white papers were due on August 1st. And unlike some programs, even if the program officer or program manager strongly discourages you not to submit, you are still able to submit a full proposal to the MIRI program. Personally, I wouldn't. Okay? They make the decision. If they're telling you don't waste your time, I would not waste my time. But you do have that feedback, but that feedback does not prevent you from submitting the full proposal, which is usually due in November.
Well, the only thing I would say, the only thing I would add to that, that's true of any time you want to submit a proposal. You can submit a proposal anytime you want. But as Kathy said, if you've already talked to the program manager and he's seen a white paper and he tells you it's not really going to fit my program, chances of getting funded probably are 10%.
Yes.
You said earlier if they reject your white paper, you don't get feedback, but if they tell you to move forward, what kind of
But
feedback?
that's Army.
Okay.
That's Army special programs in the biomedical area. In terms of white papers,
And I can say specifically for Air Force, we always tell people why we decided their white papers didn't fit our program, or we just don't have money to pick up any more than what we're already funding. We'll always give you a reason for why we decided not to continue pursuing your research area. I think the Navy's pretty good on that too. I don't know.
Army's not very good.
No, Army's not very good with that.
you know, it's just, an Army is gigantic because they're the Army. And, you know, in terms of that area. But you know what, the other thing that I found very interesting, okay, so being a program officer at NSF, and I'm sitting next to you and you're a program officer, and someone calls me and they kind of don't like what I say, and then they call you, okay, I want you to say the same thing I said, okay, as an NSF thing, and then I always kind of like, well, to be called you, like this. I mean, seriously, it's like that. In DoD, and especially DARPA, you want to send it to more than one program officer. They're very competitive. You got a good idea, there might be 3 that might be interested in this idea. And I actually went to the deputy director of DARPA and I said, is this true? And he says, yes. Send it to more than one in terms of those ideas, given that it's in sort of the bailiwick of their portfolio. So this is the Murray, and then the slide will, then we'll do Durham. And the Durham is very similar to the MRI program, the Major Research Equipment Program at NSF, okay? Except that they don't have to have cost share, where NSF has to have cost share.
Yeah, the only other thing I'd say about the DURA program, most of the money is going to go to people who already have grants. I'm being straightforward with you. It's open to anybody who wants to apply and needs a piece of equipment. But in reality, the way the program managers work, they only have so much money for their core budget. So if somebody needs a piece of equipment, they say, we're not going to fund it in here, apply to DURA. And so it is a program that supports equipment. I would guess the chances, if you're not a PI, of actually getting a piece of equipment through it are 25% maybe. Might get funded that way. There are some that get funded that way, but I just want to be straight that this really is a program that current PIs who need equipment get most of the money.
So anyone that has DoD grants before, have you gone in for the Europe?
I mean, it is a really nice program to get a piece of equipment, but you know, they tend to buy equipment for people who they know are supporting research and they're going to fit their program.
But that's something to think about too. If you have a grant and there is some major piece of equipment that ranges between $50,000 and $1.5 million that you need, that this would be a good opportunity.
And sometimes I would say, you know, if they see a white paper and they're really interested in pursuing it, but they don't have money at the time, or they don't think that PI who submitted it has sufficient data to merit a proposal, they might buy them a piece of equipment that he needs in order to get the kind of data he needs. So it's certainly worth talking to program managers about.
Actually, one of Bill's friends is giving a talk at a university, and he provided us the slides that he's using for the university, and this is one of his slides.
So Pat's at Vanderbilt giving a talk on how to get Air Force money. So I said, Pat, send me your slides so I'm telling people the same thing. So this is the Air Force, very current view of Muri. They're going to spend, what's it say, roughly, doesn't say that. Oh, it says they're going to, the way they work in the Air Force, they give you a smaller amount of money the first year because it takes you a while to build up and get staffed up and everything. So $750K the first year and then up to $1.5 million each year for the next, usually 5 years. So it's a really decent program. They're going to have maybe 8 topics this year. depends on how much gearing money they actually are getting in right now. But it does look like it's going to be, but still probably not places. And Europe, you can see there, $17 million.
And the Young Investigator Program. And again, many people go in for the career grants at NSF. And if you're putting in a career grant and you're in areas that DoD supports, it would be very smart to think about, again, understanding the culture, understanding the mission, what the goals are, to go in with a YIP. These are Young Investigator Programs. DARPA calls it the YFA. In some cases, the YIP is very general. All topic areas from physics to mathematics, computer science to biology that's supported by ONR or whatever. But for example, in Air Force this year, their YIPS was on engineering, physical sciences, environmental life sciences, and social sciences. That's what they put in for the 2017 YIPS. Again, very broad areas, and looking at how do I make that relevant to their missions. DARPA's one this year was very focused, but they also had a webinar targeted towards these areas so that the investigators from the universities could listen to the webinar to see whether or not it was appropriate. They put in white papers, and then DARPA feedback to the young investigators that said, yes, come in with full proposals for us. And so again, it's a lot of, one of the things that I like about DoD is that, and we'll get to the white paper, it's 2 pages of basically work to figure out whether or not you really meet their goals to go on and pursue. And just like the career proposals are used to identify the Presidential Early Career Awards for Science and Engineering, the DoD tends to use their YIPS to select their PCASE winners that then are awarded by the President of the United States.
The interesting thing about the Air Force YIP program is they'll actually give awards to postdocs. You don't have to be a full-time faculty member. I think that's unique among the 3 services.
Yes. And this was from his slide talking about the Air Force's going to be funding this year. It's interesting, 2014 nominees won't be announced. Probably not before they got to be cleared. Interesting. Anyway, and so here's the yes. So those were programs that were run by the office that Bill used to be in charge of basic research for. But even though they're sort of coordinated, they're the large programs that are across, Army, Navy, and Air Force, the money is actually within the services. Then there's these programs we talked about earlier of really connecting to the researchers in the laboratories.
Yeah, so this one particularly talks about Office of Naval Research programs where faculty members can come in and work with staff scientists at the Naval Research Lab. And you can see there's different levels of appointment, stipend ranges from about 1.5 to 1,400. It says there's a 1,900 a week in terms of a stipend, and of course they supply all materials and equipment. So if these are, as it says, you have to commit to work there at least 1 semester, and most people get a sabbatical and go there for 3 years.
And so it's a good program, again, putting you in the door, and especially let's say you don't have summer salary this year and you're thinking, well, my research is really relevant here. Maybe I'll go for the summer faculty research and get my foot into the door and having my summer salary being paid for those 10 weeks. Air Force has a similar program.
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar in terms of how it's laid out, how it works. So this is the Air Force Summer Faculty Research Program, and it's designed to do the same sort of thing, stimulate academic researchers interested in working with scientists in the laboratory, bring new ideas in, help shape programs for the Air Force, and give them an opportunity to maybe work with some materials and equipment that the Air Force research laboratories have that is not available everywhere. And so sometimes they have very unique pieces of equipment for doing washing work, things like that. Some unique materials and equipment for doing vestibular research, for doing cognitive research even, things you can do there that you might not be able to do in your own laboratory.
And in this course, and too, you can bring your graduate students with you, and they'll cover that salary as well.
Oh, here's a program, the AF4L Resident Research Associate Program. This is a program that actually, when I was finishing my PhD many years ago, I knew about because my major professor had actually had, at that time it was called the National Research Council Resident Research Associate, which he did down at Brooks Air Force Base in Texas, working on, he was a vision scientist primarily, he was working some other areas. But he told me about the program. I didn't know about it, but it's actually run by the National Research Council, and you go and work in an Air Force lab as a postdoc for a year or two. I think 2 years was the max, and I think it still is. Well, this says it's renewable up to 3 years, so they must have expanded it. So in the Air Force, they have 78 different resident research associates working in laboratories somewhere around the country. I happened to go to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base years ago, and that got me into the Air Force. And I really knew nothing about the Air Force. I submitted this proposal to the NRC, never thinking that the Air Force was interested in the kind of work I was doing in environmental toxicology at the time. And I went and worked in a toxic hazard lab for 2 years at Wright-Patterson. People in the Air Force heard about me. They wanted me to go to AFOSR and run research programs for them. And that started me on a career that I say I started with the National Research Council, and I ended my career at the National Research Council, directing a board on global science and technology. So you never know where life's going to lead you. There's lots of opportunities out there in defense laboratories that, you know, it's worth going to see and at least exploring. It may not fit what you have interest in, but you never know. You'd be surprised. So that's an opportunity. And often additional funds are put into the program by people in our technical directors who really want to get people out working in their lab if AFOSR doesn't have enough money to fund more than the 78 that's there. And then, once again, the summer faculty fellowship program, they support up to 150 faculty, 75 grad students at our various research laboratories.
And so these are just a set of general programs. So you can see, you can get your own intramural, extramural research being supported, but you also have opportunities going to Army, Navy, Air Force laboratories, having them pay for you, having them, you work with both your graduate students, yourself long term, and then hopefully get into the system in terms of being supported. We're now going to sort of, and the centers of excellence.
Yeah, these are areas that the Air Force has just recently started supporting, but they're sort of a marriage, once again, between universities, centers that have expertise in an area, and laboratories, in this case the Air Force Research Lab, where they have strong expertise in an area, and try to get a marriage, working together of those things. It doesn't necessarily require that the faculty member go to the laboratory and work. It may be that the scientists in the lab will go to the university lab and work, or it may be that they just do work in their own laboratory separately, but it's sort of a combined program, and they call it a center of excellence. And you can see the areas there where they currently have these kind of relationships, these kind of areas.
But again, if you have some ideas, you're having a group, you're getting together, you're doing the brown bag talks, you think that this is something very appropriate, then bring it up. If you don't ask, you don't get. I like to say, if you don't submit, you're not going to be funded. If you don't nominate, you're not going to get the award. And if you don't ask, you don't even know where you stand and what kind of ideas that can go forward. So now I'm going to turn it to Bill, who is really going to walk you through. He's looked at a lot of white papers, and walk you through what is important in the white paper, what should be in the white paper, what will get you to the next step. Because if your white paper doesn't really define what the needs are, etc., then you're going to get the answer, we're not interested.
Okay, so this, I think we've already said this. It saves time on both ends. DARPA uses something they call send us an executive summary. So I always say, read the broad agency announcement. I know that's very boring and not really easy to read, but you can drill down. I'll show you how you can actually drill down to specific topics of interest to you in your particular area. And the first thing you ask is, how does my research fit in with where they're going, what their mission is, what they say their priorities are? And you have to be very careful, make sure you follow what the solicitation says they want in a white paper in terms of number of pages. If they say they only want 2-page white paper, you better not submit 3. They probably just won't look at it. If they say it has to be on paper that's 8 by 10, certain font, you should do that. So pay attention to those formatting things. I would always suggest that you talk to the program manager first, or program officer, and tell them what you have in mind, and he can tell you immediately if it's totally off the wall, or he just doesn't have any money this year to support it, no matter how good it's going to be. That'll save you a lot of time and effort. So talk to the program manager, follow the directions in the white paper, make sure you meet the deadline. If they have a deadline for white papers, most broad agency announcements don't, but some of these solicitations do. And it will say, like, if you want to submit a MURI white paper, that's a separate announcement from a broad agency announcement. It has deadlines. And believe me, it's not the program manager who says you missed the deadline. It's the contracting officer, people who get the proposals first, and they say, this one came in 3 minutes after 4 o'clock on Friday the 13th. You can't look at it. So, you know, it seems like minutia, but that's what decides whether you're in the game or you're not. So you got to be very specific and look at those things. And the mode of submission, some want them only send in electronically, some want them sent in electronically, and also want you to send them hard copies. And sometimes they tell you what not to send. Don't send us every publication you've ever written. You're wasting paper. We don't need these because nobody's going to look at them. So that's important too. 3 critical aspects of the white paper. I always still go back to my, what do you want to do? Why do you want to do it? Who cares? I don't know why do you want to do it, but why should anyone else care if you do it? And how are you going to do it? And who are you? Why are you the person to do this as opposed to Mary Jane down the street? So that's essentially, I think, what this says. What's your approach? Why do you think your approach, given that other people probably have thought of this and worked on it, is going to advance the field as opposed to what someone else might want to do? And what's the relevance to DoD or broad national security in general, at least, and how much do you think you need to pull this off? And so there are the service-wide VAs. We mentioned each office has them, and you don't need to be specific. But then there are program-specific VAs, which do have deadlines and panel reviews and so forth. So the timeline is really critical. And it's good to talk to, like it says there in DARPA, talk to the program manager who has cognizance of that area. And that'll bring you a long way to knowing whether you're wasting your time or be a profitable endeavor for you.
So I just wanted to add on the, go back to that slide, on the program-specific BAAs. DARPA uses this a lot. And so what happens, DARPA has a program officer who comes in for 4 years. He's got to make an impact. And the first year, he's really deciding what his program is going to be. And he's going to have a workshop. And he's going to invite some people to the workshop that he's already met and gotten some ideas, but the workshops are all open. And then based on that workshop, he's going to do, or she's going to do a solicitation. And that solicitation, unlike the NSFs, which require, and NIH, which requires 6 months, you might have a month turnaround. But if you're at that workshop, you're going to know exactly what they're asking for, what they need, what to do, and after that workshop, you should already start thinking about what you're going to be doing in that solicitation. So again, the importance of being there, being part of the discussion, and fine-tuning it, so when the solicitation comes out, you go, yeah, I wrote that one. I can address this. And so that's really important and very different than that wide BAAs.
Okay, how many of you have actually looked at a DoD broad agency announcement? 1, 2, 3, maybe 10 people. 20. Okay, so, they're long, they're fairly detailed. I just want to take a few minutes to show you how to drill down quickly to an area you're interested in, find the program manager you need to talk to so you can engage. So I'm just going to pop up one here from O&R.
And Nathan, I think, has provided a one-page handout on the white papers for everybody that's here. So you have all that information there in terms of writing the white paper.
So most of you know grants.gov, I assume. Right, so you go to grants.gov, easy. Type in where it says source, and just put in O&R. Up comes all the O&R BAAs. Then you can scroll down and look at them. I'm looking at the one that looks at long-range broad agency announcement. Okay, you just click on that, it takes you through that announcement, I hope. Yep. And so you see the broad agency announcement there. You can scroll down through that thing, and it lists the various areas they're interested in. Talks about white paper formats, etc., etc. And you can just scroll down there, there's things, find the page where you want to go to. It talks about, I'm going to pick out warfighter performance. 15. Code 34. Don't be confused by all of the military acronyms. In O&R, they have code rather than departments. So they call code 34. So they do warfighter performance research. What does that actually mean? So it describes there a little bit about what they do in warfighter performance. And you can actually go down and see that they fund research in biomimetics, biorobotics, cognitive science of learning, computational neuroscience, human activity recognition, etc., etc. Then you can click on and go directly to their website from the BAA. It's coming up. And when that pops up, then you can show you how to scroll down to actually find the program manager's name. Okay, so Division 342, Warfighter Protection and Application. Scroll down, and here it shows you the various areas they're interested in. So if you were to click on, like, let's just pick one, like synthetic biology. Talks about what they're interested in, synthetic biology for naval applications. Gives you the name of Linda Chrissy. He's the program officer. Gives your email address, and you can send her an email. And the best thing I suggest you do before you send her an email is have written down sort of what you would put in a white paper that you're going to talk to her about. Rather just call her up and say, hey, I'm interested in microbiology and you're interested in microbiology. Have an idea what the project is you're interested in doing and so forth, and tell her you'd like to submit a white paper. And she'll encourage you, I hope, to submit a white paper. So don't be afraid to send an email, pick up the phone. If you want to call them and you don't get a response from the email, you can always go to their website and contact somebody else in that division, like John Pagney is their immediate supervisor, and John will tell her she should call you. So sometimes you have to be a little aggressive. Program managers generally are willing to talk to scientists at all times, but they are busy people. So you may send her an email, and Linda may not get back to you for a week. Generally, they're very responsive because they're interested in your ideas and your proposals and your thoughts on research areas. So it's as easy as that, and any of the BAAs. If you're going into AFOSR, just go to grants.gov, type in AFOSR, up comes all their BAAs. You'll see one in there for Uri, specific BAA, but you'll see the one with their broad agency announcement for basic research. And in that one, it also gives you the same information, who the program manager is for each area, and it also, in the case of the Air Force, they actually give you the phone. The phone call back. I know you're a Vanderbilt, call me when you get home.
Go back one, Bill, for some of the, we did synthetic biology, but looking at the different areas. I mean, from basic biomedical to gut micro.
Microbiology. It doesn't give it, they may not actually have a program manager at the time they put this in. But that doesn't mean they don't have a program, it just means they're not going to give you a name. Yeah, I mean, there are other areas where they do cognitive science and all kinds of things. The same for material science and chemistry, nanoscience. But just play around. You can play around online very easily with these BAAs. It used to be, individual BA and go through like now it's very easy to just go through it and find it. So any questions about broad agency announcement?
Hi there, I have a kind of a more general question. If your research is going into human populations, but a lot of the academic faculty are working in civilian populations, how do you bridge that if you want to get DoD funding and your work is interfacing with human populations?
Okay, let me see if I understand. So you're working with general human populations, and you want to see how that is germane to military populations. I would guess it's not that different. I mean, military people are different, but they're not that different. We're all human beings. They have different missions. But I mean, the same things you would work on in terms of demographics or other things might be specific. Some of those things might be specific to military families or populations and things like that. But in general, if you're working in the general area using human populations, most of it's going to be germane to the military also. I don't think that itself will be an issue.
Okay, so, but if your research is directly the samples and where you're sampling or civilian populations, it's still okay. There is ways to bridge it with interests of DoD.
Yes, or you could propose that you're doing this research with civilian populations, but you could also do that same research with military populations. And they can help you actually get into those communities and collect that kind of data also. The Army Research Institute for Behavioral and Social Sciences does a lot of that kind of research.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The Army has that program. They actually have a whole institute on that. And, and they have, obviously the human subjects going through the same kind of rules that NIH and NSF lives by, DoD also lives by. But yeah.
And they have actually made arrangements to take people to Afghanistan and study multiple populations over there and things like that. So those things are certainly doable. Yes.
I saw some of your slide showed budget ranges, I don't know
From like, some of your slides showed budget ranges from like 50,000 to 1.5 million per year. Curious if there are any dedicated small grant programs, kind of analogous to some of the divisions of NSF that they have.
I don't know, I'd say 50K is a small grant to
Yeah.
me, but you have something smaller than that, I mean, you'll get money for conferences and things like that, but you mean, you need 10K to do X, Y, or Z or something like that?
Yeah,
I
20,
think
maybe
I would just contact
20 to 50K is kind of
Yeah, so.
per year.
I wouldn't be discouraged from talking to a program manager about that possibility.
And again, if you have a really creative idea and it can really impact the mission of the program, the mission for the DoD, but it's more of a pilot data, sort of like the eagers that NSF does, or some of the R20, I think it's R25s or whatever NIH does. There's no reason, as I say, if you don't ask, you don't get. And to me, as being a program officer, and I don't know about Bill, if it doesn't cost me that much, but the impact would be very high, I'd be more willing to take that chance on something that's high risk. If it's a little bit of money, I would want it to be, this is just me talking, I would want it to be very high risk. Otherwise, why would I be interested in it? But it would make a really, a major impact, but we need to know if we need to go into that area or not. Other questions? Yes.
In the past, because of the large number of dependents in the military who are all humans and are at risk for chronic disease, there has been funding like to look at cancer prevention, diabetes, heart disease. I'm not seeing very much of that now. Is there a special area that focuses on that?
The Army has specific programs in terms of that, especially infectious diseases, etc. So, and we have a bunch of slides on the Army. They have a number of offices, and what's really interesting is their research office is right around the corner. So it's a very easy thing for you to go over there because they're in the research triangle area, talk and say, these are my ideas, who should I talk to? And again, the Army also has, just like the Air Force and ONR, a number of labs. And the labs will the labs will be focused in these general areas to work with them as well. But yes, they're very interested in that kinds of questions. Army, it's interesting, when you kind of look at Army and that, it's so large. And you really need to get down to the area, and that's going to cost, go onto the web, but also making the phone calls. Who is the right person for me to talk to? But having Bill and I served most of our career in the federal government, we're really there to find out who is the best person for you to talk to. That's part of our responsibilities.
I'm not sure if you had this in some of your slides that you just referred to on the Army side, but I know that so far you've sort of covered the basic research organizations, ARO, ONR, AFOSR, but on the biomedical side, really, that work is almost entirely housed, as you all know, with the Army Medical Research and Material Command, MRMC, they're sort of the lead. And so when you're talking about chronic diseases, diabetes, things like that, a lot of that's going to be done at MRMC and some of their partner organizations, but not at the ARO level. There's a very clear divide between ARO, which has a life sciences division, and they have some, they have biochemistry, they have genomics, things like that, but nothing medical. And then same thing with ONR, they've got, microbiodiversity, marine sciences, biofouling, those sorts of things. And then even with DARPA, they've got some things like the new P3 program, a pandemic prevention platform. There's some bio and life sciences scattered throughout these basic research organizations, but MRMC is really the home for biomedical. And somebody asked about the clinical populations when you want access to a military population for subjects. If you make connections with MRMC, they can certainly help you get access to those military populations. And you can even work with folks like WOMAC, Army Hospital, here in North Carolina, and connect with some of those folks for access to both to the populations, but also to some of their data. And by the way, my name is Kathy Sedner. I work at UNC General Administration just down the street. I used to work at ARO for a little while, so I'm kind of keen from that ARO perspective to add to the Air Force and the other perspectives here. But at the end of this, I'll mention a little bit about MRMC's having an event coming up, and it's a phenomenal opportunity to go meet face-to-face with a lot of these program managers, because in addition to picking up the phone and calling them, the best way possible is to meet them in person and talk to them about your idea and network with them over lunch and coffee and things like that. So I'll give more information about that at the end. But they also have a BAA. It's open right now, and I can provide Nathan with the information on that BAA. It's open from October 1st to September 30th. And you know, you can get up to $1 million sometimes on some of the grants and smaller awards as well.
And actually, it's interesting, we have a set, so after our break, we're gonna go back into some of the agencies, and we have a whole set of slides on that, on the medical thing, and I have this one pager that I think is really good, that's courtesy of them, that really talks about their funding levels and that will make sure that you have the copies. But what you said, but you know, here you're hearing it from her too, going to those workshops. And Nathan started at the very beginning, there is money. I like to say, if you share coffee, you share DNA. So that you're there, you're at the breaks, it's informal. When you go to meetings, I mean, most cases, like I go to the Society for Neurosciences, ONR is there, Air Force is there, NSF is there, NIH is there, they've got the booths. The best time to go down there, sit down, have face-to-face. We're about ready for our break, but I'm going to tell you, okay, I'm a program officer. This is why we said we're not releasing the tape and that. So, okay, I have to make a decision on 2 grants. Let's say all things being equal. They're both at a state school. They're both female, or they're both male. They're both kind of in the same area, okay? I'm a program officer. I'm trying to say implicit bias, explicit, you know, like that. Let's say I spent a long time on the telephone talking to you. I provided you feedback. You submitted a proposal. I don't have a face. Let me tell you, it's a lot easier to turn down someone when you don't know what they look like. Okay? It's human nature. And when I'm on the telephone and I can say, I've never met you, I've never talked to you, all things being equal, I used to say to myself, all things being equal, don't have that play in. But again, that implicit bias, he's called, he's talked to me, I've given him advice, he's taken my advice, you know, etc. The influence, that's why having these personal conversations. Now, one not to have. I go to the winter conference on brain research every year, that's why I've got my voice like this. I'm on a chairlift with a guy. We are stopped at the highest point of death. And he turns to me and he says, sometimes I just hate you. And I said, may it not be this moment. Okay, let's take on this moment here, because he had been turned down. I didn't turn him down, but he had been turned down by the NSF and when I was there and da-da-da-da-da. So when you talk to the program officer, you really don't want to be, you know, defensive, okay? And like, for example, everybody is turned down. Every Nobel laureate in physics, when he gives his speech, says an NSF or DOE or DoD turned down my creative idea that won the Nobel Prize. Everybody has them. So you really want to approach with them of getting their advice, okay? Really listening to them, you know, etc. If the program's hypothesis driven, you better have hypothesis. If the program is focusing on this mission, you want to address that mission. And so those things really important. So sharing, like what you said, going to those workshops are very important. McNerva, which we're going to talk about afterwards, also has a great, they bring in the PIs. In fact, you might want to talk about that, where they bring in the PIs and other people can come.
Well, I know specifically for the Air Force, if you go on to if you just go to Google and type in AFOSR, or Air Force website, on the right-hand side, it'll give you a list of all the workshops they're having. All their program managers have workshops where they bring in all their PIs and they sort of look at the work they're doing. Or they might have a workshop where they're just thinking about getting into a new area and they They've invited some particular people they want to make sure are there, but those are open to anybody who wants to go. They're not going to give you money to come to the meeting, but they're public, open meetings. You can go and listen, you can criticize what you hear, you can participate in the activity, meet program managers. That's a great way to make connections also. And, they have them all over the United States, depending on topic and so forth. So there are opportunities to do that. DARPA has their DARPA days.
Right.
Yeah. Good chance. You mentioned ARO. ARO is a great organization right next door. If you haven't been engaging with them, you certainly should. I was going to say call Dave Skaggs, but probably contact ARO, and they're nice people too, and they'll talk to you about their program and what their interests are. But you can also go into their website at ARO, and it will list a particular program officer and the interest, just like what I showed you throwing on. So all of their EAAs, in the ARO case, I think you go to ARO EAA, and it directs you directly to their website. So you go in there and drill down, to take a step in the procurement website. So they're very easy to get the information you need to contact. And the other thing about ARO, it's part of a bigger organization, the Army Research Laboratory, just like AFOSR is part of a bigger organization, the Air Force Research Laboratory. And they have, at ARL, they have these collaborative technology alliances, which combine industry and academia and the Army Research Laboratory folks in specific disciplines. So there's another opportunity to be part of a consortium of researchers working on robotics or whatever. So, you can find all those things on the ARL website, and names of people and so forth. So use it to your advantage. And so how many are going to go out and submit a white paper to DoD? All right.
But we need more, yes. And the other thing too, I was just going to say, I'm on the Homeland Security Advisory Board, Science and Technology Advisory Board for Homeland Security, and it's a 4-year appointment, so it's across administrations. And in March at George Mason University, they're having a workshop for universities to come in and again to hear about their programs. So DoD does this, and but Homeland Security, sometimes NSA, and it's important to attend. NIH and NSF, they don't really, they're wholly different. They have the 3 times a year or twice a year. And so really working with these more mission-oriented, not that NIH isn't mission-oriented, but agencies, it really need to take advantage of those types of opportunities, again, at sharing coffee. And we talked a little bit about this, but this is just the strategic plans that are out there now for Army, for Naval, for ONR, and for Air Force, for their science and technology strategy. And again, very easy to get. And so the Army has one for contingency plans, broad areas, technical. So they have a number of areas that they deal with. But these plans really drive the BAAs, drive the missions, drives basically, I'd like to say, you can plagiarize from them to provide your rationale for why your research is important. Quote it, use it. When you plagiarize it, you put the quotes there. I'd say, the AR says this is what I'm doing, this is why you should care.
Should we come back? I've got 1:40. So reconvene at 1.
You want to take a break, or we can go on?
Break, 10-minute break? All right. Cool. Yeah, folks want to come back at 1:55. We'll resume.
So the next set of slides are 2 programs that are This one is the congressionally directed medical research program. It was established by Congress. It is run by Army, but it does not have DoD appropriations. And you'll hear a lot about the congressionally directed medical research program. I always call it the congressionally mandated, but and what was interesting is when a couple years ago when DoD was taking a lot of cuts, okay, and they were looking at ways of doing, Congress basically says, don't touch this program, okay? We want this program, even though they're doing very similar to what NIH covers. And so it was established in 1992, and what's interesting, and this is where you can play a role, is funding for the program is added every year during the budget approval cycle by the members of the Senate or House in response by consumer advocates and disease survivors. And so really it's listening to the public in terms of where they should be investing the money. Part of it also came, they thought NIH was too conservative, so by giving the money to DoD, they would be able to get more high-risk types of proposals, except DoD uses the same really review process that NIH uses, and so it's back to the NIH. But the topic areas change, and so if you have a topic area that you're really strong with, the University of North Carolina, why not try to talk to, go with Bo and that, but try to talk to your congressman, your senators, through the university with the channels and that, by saying that this should be a priority. And so in this case, there's a two-step process. I don't know back there if you can see it, but the first step is they have a pre-proposal. It's a 10-page where they really outline the problem to be studied, the theoretical rationale, the methods, the military impact. It's screened by a designated committee, and basically what you are is you notify if you're invited to submit a full proposal. There's absolutely no feedback on the pre-application. So in this case, you do it 10 pages, they say you can submit, not submit, but you don't have, even if you're submitting, you don't have any feedback on saying you can increase it for X or Y, okay? And that's fine. And Army, in a couple of the Army programs, they don't provide feedback. They say that in the BAA or the announcement so that you're aware of that. The full proposal is 20 pages. It really follows the NIH format with hypothesis, objectives, specific aims, but it also has a very important thing, the DoD relevance, including milestones, outcome and impact statements, risk and benefit statements. Many of the DoD grants, they're a grant, like when you get a grant from NSF or NIH, you can do whatever you want. If someone asked me, Bill and I, to talk more about program officers thing, I remember telling someone advice once, okay, if you don't put this experiment in, you'll never get funded. Once you get the money, you can do whatever you want with the money, okay? But I guarantee you won't get the money if you don't have this experiment in it. And it's one of those things where I didn't think you had to do experiment, but it made sense. Because once you're given the money, your big thing at an NSF or NIH is basically to publish, to make progress, and to renew. For DoD in that, you really will have milestones and outcomes, especially in the DARPA. They want to see that you're making an impact. They have a 2-tier review. They do a panel review on their own merit, independent other applications, very similar to the NIH review. And then they have a second review, which is a programmatic review, where they actually look at, the Army will look at the relevance to the mission, the special intent of the program, the balance, the impact timeline. And even if you're the top scoring for the tier 1, you're not automatically funded in terms of the congressional programs. So these are the areas that are currently being funded. They've got on the street right now, a call for multiple sclerosis, but you can see ALS, autism, breast cancer, should be prostate cancer, vision, military burns, all 4 illnesses. But again, it's very much like the NIH. The success rates are not high in this program. But again, they do have this smaller 10-page pre-proposal and then the full proposal in terms of the review. And this is actually coming from, Army gave us this slide, which really, the director of this is Wanda Salzer. As again, the DoD programs, it manages the extramural portfolios, but it is a congressional program. Okay, the other one that I wanted to talk about, because the deadline is March, is Minerva. We mentioned this a little bit earlier. This is the brand new website that they just set up for Minerva, defense.gov. It is a program that focuses on social science research aimed at improving our basic understanding of security broadly defined. This was a program that was established in 2008 by Secretary Robert Gates. Robert Gates, before he became head of DoD, was president of Texas A&M. And he really felt that it was very important to bring more social scientists into the DoD portfolio. Social scientists, in general, tended not to want to get DoD money. So the first program was actually run by the National Science Foundation. So NSF ran the competition, ran the selection, because they wanted to ensure that it was a merit-based program, that it was, I'd like to say, not my best friend who was going to be funded by this, that it was really open competition. So NSF was involved in the first year, and then after that, DoD took it over. Every year, again, the program in terms of the goals changes. I brought this up because this is the social science questions that are being addressed in the solicitation is based on the 2014 review. This review is going to be done again in 2018. And again, you can have your input. Okay, how do you get the ideas for the topics? Again, you have the QDR, you have the early input from government agency officials, but again, we've talked over and over again, it's you talking to them saying, hey, have you thought about this? Is this a good idea? This is something that you need to be thinking of. And BAA spells out topics Monroe is interested in, but even if it's not one of the topics, that doesn't necessarily mean that they won't support your creative idea. This is the 2015 topics, and like power deterrence, contributions to societal resilience and change, identity and that, and this is the 2017. And again, you can see, again, you have societal resilience, you have power and deference, so you have some of the same areas showing up. This is what was just announced about, I think it was about 2 weeks ago. These are the general areas. These are the program officers that are responsible for the programs. The deadline is March 7th. That's the white paper. It's a 5-page white paper. And then they will do the invitations for the full proposals, which are due on June 21st, and awards amount September 5th. Their review process includes internal DoD people, some of the previous winners, so some of the scientists as well. Because again, they want good ideas, but it needs to be relevant. So one of the critical things there is how to show that this is paying attention to the goals of the Minerva program. But March 7th is not that far away, but it's 5 pages. Actually, sometimes 5 pages is harder to write than 20 pages. Okay? So any questions on the congressional directed or the Minerva? Yes?
For the congressional directive, for some of the other programs, you said it can be a real strength to say that you're working with somebody who's intramural and it fits and they see that synergy. Is the same thing true for congressional directed, or it's just more like...
You know, I don't have the answer for that, but the fact that there's a two-tier evaluation, the first is the NIH one, and the second one is relevance. I don't think teaming with people from the laboratories hurts at all, because again, they're working very directly in terms of the mission. And so it's a very nice synergy.
Well, I would guess it might be hard, maybe our friend from the Amarillo, if she's still here.
Yeah.
From Army can correct me, but I would guess it would be difficult to find people, even in the Army Medical Research and Material Command, who are working themselves on breast cancer, prostate cancer, muscular dystrophy, this kind of thing. What do you think?
Agreed.
Yeah, so
I'm thinking of
it would
somebody.
be a lot harder, I think, to make a connection with the lab.
I know somebody who works for a naval study, a millennium cohort study. They're starting this cohort study of people in the Army. So something like that, where there was an internal, so that's the kind of thing I'm thinking of. Maybe it'd be good to talk to my.
Oh, in that case, you know, maybe if you know they're actually doing work in that area, but these congressionally directed things aren't something the Army generally chose to do. Congress told them, we'll do it, here's the money.
That's why every time they say directed, I say mandated. We were both in Washington when this came about, and it was like, what? And again, DoD, and Leslie can talk to this about this too, Congress will not stop this program, even though even NIH and HHS says, wait a second, this isn't our domain.
I just wanted to add that I affiliated with two PIs in legacy systems that have gotten City Mercury Awards, and a major favorable factor was having connections with scientists at the VA.
Yeah.
So that was very helpful in their presentation.
And I was going to say similarly that I was lucky enough to get a CDMRP under the partnering PI option. And at least from the one funding notice that I looked at, it seemed to be a higher success rate if you were doing a partnering PI option with two institutions. Similar. I don't know. I don't have the numbers to back it up across all the years, but
Those PIs were not in the military.
they were not lab.
Right.
Another institution that
Yeah.
is with.
And I'm sitting here too, because you have a VA hospital very near here, right? Working with your hospital. And I imagine some of the VA scientists are also faculty members at the campus. And so that's always a good collaboration. So now what we're going to do is dwell into kind of down, and again, you're hearing a lot of repeating, but into Air Force, DARPA, ONR, and the Army Medical Group, kind of more enforced. And part of this is to get you, when you see the larger names, you see Code 30 or see that, you kind of like go, whoa, but really get down to what these programs are about, which are relevant to what you're doing. And Bill, you're up.
So, Air Force, my old organization. So, the Air Force Research Laboratory, as we mentioned before, has laboratories all over the United States. And so this just lists some of them and sort of mentions the areas where they work. So if you go to Rome, New York, they have a lab there that works mainly cyber and information technology. You get down to Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico, Air Force Research Lab component there works mainly on directed energy weapons and space sorts of things. If you go down to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, they work mainly materials, aerospace engineering, human performance, and the biggest piece of the lab is actually in Dayton, Ohio, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. But they have, places down in Florida, Tyndall, where they do work in energetics and explosives. So you can find a laboratory somewhere in the United States that's probably working on something, almost any topic. So AFRL headquarters is in Dayton, Ohio, and AFOSR is there in Boston, right outside Washington, D.C.
And I just want to point out, before NSF moves, NSF, ONR, Air Force, and DARPA are all within 2 blocks of each other. So if you're visiting one, you might as well stop and visit the others.
Okay. Good idea. Okay, so this just sort of reiterates what I just said, except puts it in black and white where you can read it. So those will be available to you if you have an interest in any of those areas. You can actually go to the AFRL website, and it will give you people who can contact in those scientific directors. And if you're doing
from basic research, of course, the best place to start is AFOSR. Okay, AFOSR is organized into 4 sort of divisions, directorates: engineering, complex systems, physics or physical sciences, chemistry and biology, sort of lumped together. You can see the sort of things they work on there, and information and networks, and cyber work. Most of the cyber technology stuff comes out of that directorate. But this is the kind of things, and I'm not going to read all these things to you, but we're just going to flash through them quickly so you can take a moment to look and see what's there. But you can find these same things on the PAAs, grants.gov, and go down to the broad agency announcement. And that's even better because that'll give you the name of the current person who's responsible for these areas. But you see a lot of work on mechanics, space propulsion, aerodynamics, and so forth in this group. Cognition, machine intelligence, cyber. This bottom one, trust and influence, a very big area and relatively new to DoD, and it all has to do primarily with issues of 2 things, which are somewhat, you would pick up and read together, and that is trust and influence in terms of dealing with other cultures, but also trust in the sense of autonomous systems. How much can we trust that this system is actually going to do what we expect it to do, what we need it to do? Sort of like pilots, when they came along with automatic pilots, they say, I think I'll just fly my own thing, I don't trust them. So there's a lot of work on issues of trust, but from 2 different perspectives. Physical sciences, a lot in materials and extreme environments, a lot of work on quantum stuff and semiconductors, those kind of things, remote sensing, laser interactions with materials and with humans, and a lot in a reasonable amount, I guess we would say a lot, in performance and biosystems, multifunctional materials, and they do a lot of work on organic chemistry, things mainly focused on novel polymeric materials and bridging polymers with more hardened materials. Principal evaluation criteria for OSR is probably not that different. It's a technical merit of the proposal and the relationship of the work to the mission. But then of equal importance are the rest of these, but they take sort of, in some sense, a back seat if you don't meet the first 2. Experienced faculty, have to have the facilities, etc. They do have a peer review. It's different than NSF and IH in that it's program manager responsible for getting 3 ad hoc reviews, a minimum of 3 ad hoc reviews before he or she makes a decision. But some of them set up panels of extramural people who determine all of their proposals. So it varies, but there is always a merit review. DARPA. Want to say anything about DARPA?
So here are the different divisions of DARPA. So they go from defense sciences, this is the brand new office, Biological Technology Office. It was established about a year and a half ago, and they had a big workshop in San Francisco and then in Boston to talk about what they're doing. They're still getting their ideas in terms of that program. Information Innovation, Microsystems Technology Office, Strategic Technology, and Technical Technology. These are more, I would say, the applied kind of development areas, even though they're doing some basic research, because they're supposed to, as they say, DARPA is supposed to actually get into the product at the end. As I mentioned before,
If I could
Yes.
chime in, I'm
Yes.
somewhat biased. DARPA does some basic research. They do have a basic research budget line, but as their name implies, they are an advanced research projects agency. So they, at the end of their 4 years, they expect some kind of something you can hand them, whether it be a new algorithm or prototype of something or whatever. So it's not typically the long-term fundamental research you think of when you think of AOSR or ERO or ONR in that sense, because it is, the program managers are term limited too. They come in for 4 years, they can't stay more than 4 years, so they go away, and generally the program goes with them, not always, but generally. So it's a 4-year window of time, and then something new.
They actually wear badges on the day that they're there so that they count off their 4 years for them, which I always found sort of interesting. But the other thing that I always tell people is because they're there for 4 years, the first year they're really getting the ideas. That's when you want to get in to see these people. You know, they might have a very large, a name like ecosystem populations. You know, what does that mean? But now getting them in. And one of the things that I do as a company is about every 3 months I give a list of all the new program officers for DARPA to like University of North Carolina, so that if there are people in that area, they can get to them. And again, they sponsored Revolution High Payoff Research Bridging the Gap. I recently read a science article, and the GAO did a study on whether or not DARPA was a success. And the way they did it was they looked at 10 projects, and 5 of the 10 actually did have the product or the technology development at the end that was then being incorporated into the DoD mission. And so the question is how do you define success in that way? But they do have full-scale technology demonstrations in these areas. And this is the other thing, and this is taken out of the Science magazine, where you kind of look at, again, since many of you are familiar with NSF, the DARPA and NSF funds. NSF always has a fixed budget. Program officer has a budget. They know what their budget is year to year. DARPA is open-ended. It's enough to complete the project. And so again, someone asked about, how much does it cost? Well, what does the project actually cost? Ideas. Program managers are there. They come in for 4 years. They're supposed to create their ideas and sell them. Whereas NSF, the program officer has flexibility to develop new initiatives. And they can usually do that through a workshop. They apply. Program managers will reach out to applicants. They'll shape teams, and as say the workshops, they'll bring in this workshop. They'll invite people, but then you can also go in even if you're not invited. But who do they invite? They invite the people that have already been talking to them, coming in with the ideas. NSF's regular solicitations. Reviewed. NSF use panel ad hoc reviewers. The program manager judges the quality. The selection. Program officers at NSF actually makes the decision based on the recommendations of the panel and ad hoc reviewers. But here, the programs will select with the goal in mind. They're managed. Program managers will manage you. Milestones, deliverables. As I said before, at NSF, once you get the grant, you can do whatever or not do whatever you want with it. It's just that you have to be accountable when you come back in terms of your progress. And you get a yearly progress report, but except for once, those things have always never been turned down. And one person basically said this person didn't do any progress and denied the second year. Well, meanwhile, the guy called up and was hysterical. And so then he wrote a real progress report. And I was surprised that someone actually read the previous progress report. But anyway, so those are sort of the differences between the two agencies. And again, don't hesitate to contact. We hear this over and over again. And as I already told you, basically, and this is actually from their website, you can contact more than one. Okay, it's not like this is the right program. Give your ideas to a lot of people. These are the types of questions that you're going to be asked. And again, you go back to Bill's white paper. What are you trying to do? How is this done now? What are the limitations? How will the approach remove these limitations? The idea is successful. What difference is it going to make? And that's true regardless in terms of questions. Even on your NSF and NIH grants, you should be thinking about those kinds of issues. And then, as I've already said, with the evaluations, decisions at DARPA are made very quickly due to the short change of command and by the program manager. And again, this comes right off their website. The key: do not constrain your great ideas on how you think DARPA may react. Because DARPA doesn't appear to be interested in a particular area doesn't mean that they won't be interested in it. So if you got a good idea, shop it around. What can happen? They say no. It costs a phone call and maybe a 2-page white paper. I think it's really worth it, especially if you're very interested in pursuing that line of research. And again, my favorite one is contact as many as you think would be interested in your project ideas. I guess that Bill can address this too, is sometimes they're very competitive in their programs. And so they want to get the right people and the right in there. And so they're actually kind of maneuvering, saying, I want you, and I want you to be my program and not Bill's program. O&R.
Can I just add?
Yeah.
To DARPA, so in addition to your questions that you have up there, they have something called the How Meyer Catechism. And it's a list of 7 questions. You
Yes.
can Google it, but the program that I've interacted with, saying, hey, I have this research and this idea, who's the right PM to go through, they'll say, well, give me a 1 or 2 page white paper and answer these 7 questions. That's the first step. And then just 2 quick examples of this on approaching there. We have there's a PI in Charlotte that I'm working with, and he basically had a cold phone call on it, right? Said, I've got this great idea, using visual analytics for biosurveillance, tracking passengers as it, power packaging and the newspaper with the article. And he went up there, made a pitch, and now he got funding from them. And then a different pathway was we had some researchers at his state that are working on the very early stages of liquid metal-based antennas. And some folks on Sport Drive and Special Operations Forces heard about it and came up and met with them and said, this is awesome, but it's too early for us to really take control of it. So we need to go talk to DARPA. So we have Bird Connection, and they have DARPA. So you can have lots of different ways, but this is a good thing.
And that's true. That came from one of the very first DARPA directors, and it's on their website, and it's really like the philosophy in terms of the training that they give when they come in.
Okay.
Okay. Other questions?
Okay, just a quick snapshot on ONR. This is just sort of their org chart, and I'm not going to put names on those things because names in those positions change very often. So they have a director of technology now. They don't really have a director of innovation. They have a director of research, Larry Schutte. They have a director of transition. That position's gone, it's called director of technology. And Dave Walker, who was the assistant secretary of the Air Force of Science, Technology, and Engineering, is now filling that position at ONR. So these positions change a lot, and people from one service move to others.
And the director of research just announced his retirement.
Shooting? Younger retired. Well, anyhow, and the fellow who was the director of transition, Tom Killian, he's now the chief scientist over at NATO, and before that, he was assistant secretary of the Army for research, development, and engineering. So these people move around. But, so I don't try to put names on there, but you can see these codes and things that we mentioned before don't mean a lot to the outside community. But these are areas, and the problem I have with them, it really, when you're interested in science and you look at those things, sometimes people get scared off. And they say, well, there's no basic research at ONR. But you look at those things and yes, there is. But as I showed, when you go into the actual BAA and go into warfighter performance and look at the things they're actually supporting, you see a lot of fundamental research. So don't be turned off by this. And actually, ONR manages basic research money, 6.1, 6.2, applied research money, and 6.3 was advanced development money. And about 40% of their money is basic research money. So they have a fair amount of basic research money. And so this is code 30 and the sorts of areas they work in. I'm just going to flick through these real fast unless you have a particular question about an area. Machine learning, reasoning intelligence, mathematical optimization, all kinds of stuff in there, computational methods. Ocean battle space sensing. Do you really think marine mammals and biology would be in there? But they have a lab in Hawaii which trains dolphins for sensing out mines and other things in the ocean. So they're interested in mammal sensing. programs here tend to be more applied in general, like polymer matrix composites, not so much.
And that's just the,
Yeah, the overall strategy. You can see they also have a big interest in autonomy and unmanned systems. They do all the services, power and energy, which you wouldn't normally think is a big DoD area. It actually is, because they want more and more standalone energy sources. Warfighter performance, we sort of went through before, so I'm just going to provide that. Science of autonomy pops up in a number of directors you see there. And because they all look at it from different angles, from the trust issue to how humans and machines actually interact and those kinds of things. Okay, BAA we went through before, so I'm not going to elaborate on anything except the bottom line. Do not evaluate proposals against each other. So, once again, the program manager rules the day. That's what that said. You can read all the words, but that's what it says. So, find it. And they have, of course, a lot of laboratories and research centers. Probably the biggest one that does the most basic research is NRL.
it is in Washington.
Yeah. So that's right in Washington, D.C., but SPA war out in San Diego, a lot of NAVC components around D.C. and other places, Mississippi and so forth. Whole medical community, Navy Med, sometimes called UMed, they have laboratories that are supported by ONR and NAVAIR. Most of those other laboratories, other than NRL, get mainly 6.2 and 6.3 funds. NRL does most of the fundamental sort of research, 6.1, 6.2 laboratories. More like the Army. Okay, Army Lab. They have, you might have a picture of where their labs are too.
Yeah, we do at the very end.
Yeah, they have laboratories, but they also have research centers which do more applied work, which would be important to think about whether you should engage with those, particularly if you're working in like human performance or those kind of things, or talking to science or medical. They're not involved in medical at all, but they do some human performance work that's also related to medical. The human performance work is mainly done by the Army Research Lab on Aberdeen. But that just shows you all the different components of the Army that are involved in research, development, engineering, the centers, Medical Research Command, Army Corps of Engineers, which we didn't talk about, which does a lot of research on materials and environment. And they have labs, Pittsburgh, Illinois, and other places, Old lab up in New Hampshire. So, and of course, they have a small group of folks in Washington who are part of the Army Institute for Behavioral and Social Research. They are program managers. I don't think they actually do research there. Is that correct? You know?
I think they contract it all out.
They contract it all. I think they're.
You'd like to come up for the Army?
I think they're a program management shop.
Yes.
More than anything, sort of like AFO's Army. And once again, all these programs are tiered across. ARO. You want to talk about ARO? Okay, what do you talk about ARO?
So I was most familiar with, in physical sciences, there's different divisions, including the chemistry division, which is where I sat. And then life sciences, the office that was next to us as well. But, I mean, it breaks down very similarly to the AFOSR and ONR branches. But, I mean, the key thing is to get to know these folks. And as Bill referred to earlier, they're right down the street, 15-minute drive. They have a new building, it's actually very nice in Frontier. And if you ever want an introduction to a program manager or the area, please let me know. I'm more than happy to make an introduction. But
Just go to the next one.
That helps.
Yeah, so
Oh,
what I
there you
did is, yeah, so what I did is, just like we drilled down before, you hear life sciences, and in life sciences, they have biological sciences and social sciences. Within social science, biological, they have genetics, neuroscience, biochemistry, microbiology, and social sciences, cultural and behavioral sciences, institutional organization, and social informatics. But if you go back, and there's very little money here in this office, though. If you go back to the next slide, you know, you see, you know, neuroscience, but it's very much focused in terms of areas. So the overall theme for life sciences is to explode the biological systems to create revolutionary capabilities for the Army and beyond. So think about using biological systems for new materials or those kinds of activities. Sensing, using, as Mr. Golden NASA used to say, Mother Nature holds all the best patents. Okay, let's use some of those patents to really make materials that can think or evolve or can, if they get hurt, can fix themselves. That kind of stuff. And then the social science is exploring the human behavior at the individual, local, state levels. So again, it's very focused. So they have programs, but it's focused. Next slide.
You can also, you might want to consider, as you get to know these folks, consider trying to be a program manager at one of these organizations. They mentioned DARPA's 4-year rotation. Right now, there's a professor from UNC Charlotte that's up there, just started a few months ago, with somebody who was at ARO, has been at DARPA for the last few years, and that's, they keep talking about how that's the best way to get in there and understand their organization, the culture, the mission, how it operates, and what goes on behind the scenes, and also get to know how the other service organizations work as well. And what made me think of this is with social sciences, at ARO for a long time, it was a professor from ECU who was there on an IPA assignment part-time. So there's different arrangements that exist.
That's a good point. And a lot of places like AFOSR and I know ONR hired people as IPAs, university professors, who came in and worked for 1 or 2 years as a program manager. We go back to their institution.
And as you guys know, NSF's 40%. I started as a rotator. I rotated in, I rotated in the back, and I came back permanently. But it's interesting about, with the rotator and that, and it's not just DARPA. So when someone's interviewing for an NSF rotatorship, we always ask them, what do you want to do? What do you want to do differently? What new initiative do you want to start? Because you have that kind of power to really bring in your ideas. So it's a very powerful way of making impact in terms of the fields, but helping the mission, and then understanding everything you wanted to know about the federal agencies.
Yeah, and don't be just limited to what's on their website or their BAA as well. I mean, you can drive a truck through most of these BAAs, but in some cases, like the biochemistry program manager at ARO, she talks regularly to the Army Criminal Investigation Service and the folks down at Special Operations Command TUBA, and she's constantly putting things in her own program to support them as the users. So it may not be just limited to what's on the website.
So now, so I didn't go through the other ones, but I wanted to show you, like just in life sciences, what's there. And if you go onto the website, you can get that. But this is the Army Medical Research Material Command. And again, you were talking about that. Well, this is the agency, you can put that funds the research, the biomedical research. A lot of it's very applied, where they really want to get to the soldier, make sure the soldier is safe, etc. But I love this slide because you have, this is amazing to me in terms of all the different offices that go into the organization chart in terms of responsibilities, etc. But the bottom line is, if you have a good idea, you can track down the person that's going to be interested in it.
Yeah, so unlike with the ONR BAA, the ARO BAA, I'm not sure about everyone's assuming it's the same. They list technical points of contact for each program, and you can find their name and their email and their phone number pretty easily. With MRMC, intentionally don't put names and emails and phone numbers out there. It's really hard to find. And so that's why when I mentioned that event, they're having a big conference. They have an annual conference in March. And it's coming up, and they send almost all their program managers to it. I've been for the past 2 years, and it's absolutely amazing how many program managers are there and how accessible they are, because they have so many networking breaks built in and so much time to actually talk with them. And they are really interested in them. They're not there you know, mandatorily, they're there because they want to be there, period.
But that is really true, and, you know, in terms of the Army, you can't track down that person. And a lot of the white papers, they won't give you any feedback, and they say that in solicitation. It's a yes or no answer and no feedback. So it's very frustrating for the backward member not to be able to know, who do I talk to? Why was it turned down, etc. But it's the personality of the different forces. You wanna?
I don't focus on the organization, I'm focused on just the.
Okay.
updating.
So anyway, so this is our sort of, stay right here, Bill right here. So in terms of the organizations, they have infectious disease, they have the military operation medicine, the partnerships, they have program managers in these different areas. They also, again, have Army funded medical research. We've talked about the centers, the last slide is going to be doing the centers, the congressional mandated programs, et cetera. And it's a very, I mean, they really are responsible for the biomedical and the health and safety, independent of the VA, of the warriors. This is a great slide, and this is the one that I'd like to have passed out, because it really talks about, again, looking at the strategic guidance in terms of their strategic plans. They do a broad area announcement. Again, you have to submit a proposal. It's a yes or no. If it's not approved, that's it. Then it goes down in terms of full proposals. It goes to the external scientific review. And then again, another internal over review. So even if you're very strong here internally, they'll look at it, it may not improve, and then the recognition of the funding. And so this is the internal programmatic review. This is kinds of the areas that they're considering for this activity. So again, this fits very much into more of the NIH, except they have this ones where, no, you're not going to go forward. And they really do, just like Bill was saying, the program officer has to control, it really needs to meet the programmatic review as well as being top in terms of the science. And you can be the top in the science and not get funded. These are responses to some of the threats in terms of diseases, the chemical and biological warfare, environmental hazards, some of the, as they say, the battlefield, loss of limbs, etc., the operational, the things. So they're obviously interested in countermeasures for these activities.
I think one thing that's not on there too is
Yes.
the mental health piece. So there is the blast injury and head trauma, which is part of the whole traumatic brain injury, but they also fund a lot in PTSD and mental health across the board. And I was just talking to Greg Rose earlier about the word resiliency comes up a lot. And at last year's conference, they talked a lot about the resiliency piece and trying to understand the mechanisms for what makes one person more resilient and predict that and so forth.
It will come back. Questions, please, And then again, this is, again, one of these organizational slides, congressional mandated programs. We have the research, the development, the acquisition. Because a lot of it is they want to get it into the field. They want to get the ideas. So it's like if you're looking at burns, how do you evaluate the burn? Should they go to, if they're in the field in Afghanistan, do they need to go to Germany? Do they need to go back to the States? Can they be treated there? Really like technology that can assess these things that are more applied than some of the basic research, because they're there really to help our servicemen or the word. Your program area directorates and the key objectives under each one. And again, you will have copies of all these slides. The casualty care, clinical rehabilitation medicine. And so it's a major thing. And here are the laboratories. Again, from Fort Detrick to the Washington one, the Maryland, a lot in those areas. But again, they also have the laboratories and more laboratories. And the other thing that they do, and you might want to address this, is they don't work alone. They work a lot with NIH on the human traumatic brain injury. The Neurology Institute and DoD works very closely with that. They really like to partner where it makes sense. At the FDA, et cetera. And so they have a lot together because they know that they can't do what they need to do alone. And finally, this is some future directions that they're heading in. And brain health is going to be very important. They're part of the big brain initiative. We'll start the Obama administration, and hopefully will be continued because Congress says so.
Something else that came up at last year's conference was more focus on female soldiers and service members, and the differences in their back injuries and whatever kind of injuries they're sustaining in these new occupational roles as they're being approved for fulfilling on the roles they had to pass. That was a really big message from last year's conference.
Did they put the conferences, the overheads and that on a website?
They emailed out to all the participants. I'm not sure if it's broadly available, but I can pull it, share it.
That would be something good for the VP's office here too.
And at those events, they have a panel for each of the 7 program areas. There's a panel with a roundtable discussion. So you can hear, like, here's our top priority. And I'll be honest, I was surprised, on one of the panels for the combat casualty care, which is sort of immediate care of the battlefield to get somebody to a point where they can get a hospital treatment. They said, we don't want another tourniquet. We have too many tourniquets as it is, so just please don't focus on it. And that was brutally honest, but I found it really interesting that, they're not like, we want everything.
And again, the criteria, the most important thing is A, overall scientific technical merit. And then these are the sort of B through G contributes to it. But you first have to pass muster on that one, which is the #1 priority. And this one, the ARO staff, initial review, scientific merit, potential contribution, Army mission, if funds are expected to be available for the effort. If they're not considered as sufficient scientific merit or relevancy, or they're not going to have funds in that area, they just basically decline you right there. So you don't go any further in terms of the review. Proposals not declined are then subject to the extensive peer review. As I said, it's very similar to the NIH, and then the technical merit relevance to the programs. So again, at that stage where they decide that it doesn't fit in terms of the thing, or they don't have any funds, they just send it back with no comments. And here is another great slide in terms of the different command centrals and the laboratories and across the country. And that was it. So do you have anything more to add?
So this is a perfect slide. Some of the organizations that were listed on the first Army slide, so like Army Research Labs, which is the higher headquarters for ARO, and then you have the RD, which is Research and Development Engineering Commands, and there's more part of that big bureaucracy, but some of those organizations do fund basic research. It's smaller pockets of money, but they do fund basic and applied research at universities. So one of your faculty members here, Dinesh Minocha, in computer science, he has the majority of his funding from the Computing and Information Sciences Directorate at Army Research Lab. I would say it's more than 3/4 of his lab is funded that way. There's places like the Natick Soldier Center, which is part of Army DECOM, and they do a lot of human performance, combat feeding, nutrition, making sure that water is safe to drink, things like that. So if you ever have questions about this may be relevant to the military, but I just have no idea where to go, it's scattered and hidden in so many pockets. Just find LinkedIn, and we can try to find the right home for it.
And I will tell you, maybe because Army isn't in Washington, D.C., so I didn't interact with them for 25 years, but it's interesting because of the fact that they go from the Army Corps of Engineers to the Medical Research and Material Command. It really has a lot. And the ARO office is very small and more the basic research in terms of the coordination. So you really have to, and the fact that they don't list the names, and that you really have to start making phone calls and really working your way through. And when you have people that already know, that's the best place to start. So this is our final slide, and it's brought back to what Kathy was saying. And Kathy, thank you very much. Washington beckons you all, and it's important to write proposals. If you don't submit, you don't get support. But you say over and again, interact with program officers. Volunteer. How many people have reviewed proposals for DoD or for NSF or NIH? Okay, if you haven't, you can go onto the NSF and NIH website and actually volunteer to review proposals. The best way of understanding how to write a grant is to review a proposal because it teaches you how not to write a grant in terms of the things. Serving on panels and councils, serving as a rotator, as we said, in terms of offices, NSF, DARPA, the Army office. Organize, participate in the workshops and the meetings. Go to the NIH days, the NSF days. As you know, University of North Carolina is sponsoring an NSF day in April here, where they're going to have program officers from all of the NSF down to talk. The DoD proposal today, what they were saying there, sign up for the newsletters, etc. But the most important thing is read the BAA, read the solicitation, understand the culture, understand the mission, and contact the program officers and what to write paper. And I'm going to let Bill say the last thing.
Well, Washington beckons you, but there's a lot going on in laboratories all around the country to stop. They are very interested in talking to scientists, so we're interested in the same problem there. So don't focus just on Washington. From Washington, so we focus on Washington. There are all these other organizations, and NRO, as we said, right next to it. So don't forget that. And don't be afraid to pick up the phone and call programs. Program managers drive the decision making in DoD. And so they're the ones that are going to make decisions whether something is of interest or not, whether it's all supposed to be funded. I want to thank you all for coming and being patient with us for 3 hours and talk to you about the importance of DoD research and how you might fit in. If you have any particular questions after this, please contact any of us and we'll help you find the right person and connect. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you guys. And just a closing remark, be on the lookout for emails from my office, in addition to slides, links to the conferences that Kathy mentioned, reminders about travel programming and funds available to support your travel up there. You can also expect sort of further programming emails. We're going to kind of smaller groups going forward, so you guys can learn about each other's research ideas. It's very important as well. Today was very much designed to be an overview, get to know the agency. I think going forward, we'd like to bring kind of a tighter knit approach to some of the program funding research ideas. But I really want to thank all of you. We weren't sure if DoD Defense Workshop was going to work, but it did, and thanks. It's so exciting to see an interest on campus. And please note these great folks are available to you. Here to answer questions. Please contact me with any questions. And see you at the next thing. Sorry,
I forgot to mention that the FRMC conference coming up is March 6th through the 8th. Well, actually, there's a main conference on March 7th and 8th. And they have a pre-conference seminar on the 6th and Monday. It's like about how to work with us 101 seminar. And then in 2 days are the subject matter material.
And where is the conference?
It's in Ellicott City, Maryland. So, not too far from Baltimore. But we got some funding from the Biotechnology Center to support some registration fees for faculty members who want to go. So it's a limited budget, but if you're interested in going and you would like some support for that registration fee, which is about $700, please contact me within the next day or two. It's up and down to the left. But,
thank you guys.